Hardcore World of Warcraft is probably the most addictive video game I have played in a very long time. If you don't know what Hardcore WoW is, it is a difficulty setting, essentially, for World of Warcraft, or more specifically for Classic World of Warcraft, meaning you have to play on the official Classic WoW servers, and on specific servers even, and then download an add-on or like a mod that keeps track of your character to make sure they're following these specific guidelines to do this difficulty challenge. What makes Hardcore WoW hardcore is it kind of comes from the terminology from hardcore mode in Diablo games. Basically, if your character dies even once, they are dead forever. You have to delete the character. There's also some other stipulations here, because actually it wouldn't be the hardest thing to level through the game without dying. The most common way to level in World of Warcraft is to spam dungeons. And also you could have groups, and going through with a group of 5 people can get, make the game pretty easy. It's a lot harder to die when you have a bunch of ways to protect yourselves and your friends. So hardcore is more of a solo experience. You can do dungeons, but you can only do each dungeon once, and they're at certain levels. So you can't be over-leveled and run somebody through. You can't trade, and you can't buy stuff from other folks either, so money doesn't really have that much of a meaning. You can't, kind of capitalist your way through the game either. You have to play the game. The only way to get to level 60 without dying is to play the game, and be competent as an individual, which I personally really like. I've leveled a couple characters in Hardcore WoW, none of them ever close to 60, but I've gotten a few that are over level 10, right? The average level a player gets to before they die is around level 14 or 15, which I could say is very similar to me. Most people you're going to experience in this game exist below level 20. Even more exist below level 15, I would argue. It took me around 30-ish hours to get to level 25, which was the highest level I got to in Hardcore WoW. When I died at level 25, I decided that was probably going to be it, and I wasn't going to play any more of the game. Not necessarily because the game wasn't fun. The game is actually pretty enjoyable, at least to me, but because I maybe spent around anywhere between 80 and 100 hours playing Hardcore WoW, and I don't really need to play it anymore. One of the coolest parts about Hardcore WoW is that it encourages you to play smarter and better, just objectively better. You have to be really careful about what you are fighting, what moves the enemies are using. You have to be careful about what moves you're using. And because death has such a big consequence, I died at level 25, I lost 30-something hours of progression. That means a lot, and I died being stupid. I fought 2 enemies at the same time that I just wasn't equipped to be fighting. And I think that level of skill that you have to fight multiple enemies at once, or to fight an elite maybe, because you can't group, right? And what you do and how you choose to do it, I think makes this a very rewarding experience. What I enjoy the most about Hardcore WoW is that it kind of forces people to play WoW the way that I like to play, which is by questing and not grouping up with other people. It limits dungeon runs and spams, and I personally think that dungeon spamming has ruined World of Warcraft. There's a whole bunch of other things people could argue did it, but I definitely don't think encouraging people to spam dungeons makes the world feel good. In some of this footage I'm showing you, there's people just all over the place doing quests and fighting enemies, and it feels very active. It feels very lived in. It feels like there is a world full of people doing stuff. In normal classic WoW, that is not the case. People basically start spamming dungeons as quickly as they can, as effectively as they can, and that is the way they play the game. And then the end game, you start seeing people. But for me, Azeroth and leveling is such a big part of the game, and personally my favorite part of the game, that you could have all these adventures with all these people and do all these different things that aren't just run through the same 20 or 30 minute dungeon over and over again. But that seems to be the the most effective way to play the game is to spam dungeons, and I'm glad that they took that out of hardcore WoW. You can't do that, so you're forced to see people and interact with people. And you might say, well, there's no groups. You can't group up, so how is there good or bad player interaction? And I have a few examples of player interaction that I thought was pretty good. So the first one was me being a good person, is I'm in like Northgard Keep. I think I have footage of this. And I'm killing named enemies for a quest, and this warrior shows up. And at first I'm competing with him because I want to get the quest done. And then I sort of realize that the warrior has no way of tagging. He has no way of tagging an enemy before I do, which means it's not really a competition. At some point, it's just kind of bullying. And so I feel bad, and I'm like, hey, listen, I won't tag the next enemy. We'll get your quest done, and then I'll come through and I'll do this because I don't have a problem. And he was like, sure, great. And so we kill a couple enemies, and we're waiting for his guy to show up. And then a bunch of other people show up, and they're not interested in letting this warrior get his turn in. You know, he eventually gives up and leaves. But, you know, that is an interaction that I think even slightly, but it's very memorable to me because there's so few interactions that happen outside of dungeons in any version of classic WoW or modern WoW, right? Another example is that I was doing a quest in Hillsbrad Foothills, and this mage was there, and I was kind of being a little bit sloppy, and the mage helps me out, and so we decide to help each other out and do the quest together. So we each did the quest twice, once for him to get the kill and once for me to get the kill, and we end up kind of like pulling a little too many people, and we gotta like run away, and it was fun. It was a fun, nice moment, but they don't all have to be positive. I'm a bit of an asshole. So another time I'm in Hillsbrad Foothills, I'm like killing these spiders in this cave, and I'm running away because I don't need to be in the cave anymore. And there are all these spiders chasing me, and I end up running past like an undead warlock, and I could have left a different way, but I thought it would be funny if I killed the warlock. So I run past the warlock, and all these spiders start surrounding him, and then I sit back from a distance and I watch them kill him. So I thought it was funny, can't do that. And that doesn't really matter too much in normal WoW because the death doesn't mean anything. But here, this guy's level 20 something character just got absolutely owned, mainly by me. And then and then I was in northern Ashenvale to like go to like a Furbolg cave, and I see a named Furbolg nearby, and I just decide to kill it. Like whatever, maybe he drops an item or something that starts a quest. This could be fun. And while I'm fighting it, I see this human paladin show up, and he is pissed that I'm killing this named enemy. So what he does is he goes around and he starts doing the same thing I did to that warlock, right? He starts aggroing all these little Furbolgs, and he starts running back to me. And now I played a paladin for over 15 years. I know exactly what this motherfucker's going to do. And so I start, I'm not going to kill the Furbolg at time, so I run away really slowly. I start kiting the Furbolg back, and the paladin bubbles, and all the Furbolgs de-aggro, But at this point, I am pissed. I couldn't believe somebody would do that shit to me. And so what I decided to do was I decided to camp that named Furbolg for an hour and a half, never letting the rep paladin tag it until he gave up and left because I was so petty and vindictive. And I think those player interactions, whether you think I'm an asshole or whatever, I think they're very valuable. And I think that, even if you're still not in a group, you can still interact with other people. You just, quests will take more effort from your part, or you have to be more creative in the ways that you are harassing people. If I was to say there are problems with hardcore WoW, I would say that I encountered basically kind of two very distinctive issues. The biggest one being enemy respawn time. I'm not super against there being a horde of people around one specifically named enemy, because you never have to do any quests. No quest is mandatory. No quest is mandatory. I've grinded for levels plenty of times. I will say, though, having to compete with people for multiple named or like types of enemies, fighting Krushnag, the leader of the centaurs, fighting people for that one guy, I actually didn't have so much of a problem with. But if I had to kill X amount of deep moss hatching spiders, right, and I'm competing with other people who also have to kill 8 deep moss hatching spiders, then the respawn rate of these spiders should be a lot higher. Because to me, you're already supposed to be there, and fighting for one named enemy is a lot different than fighting for 8 named enemies. The other issue I ran into it is, like I said, I probably played around 30 hours on just my level 25 Horde character, and I spent probably a majority of the time in the Barrens. Now, I went to a bunch of other places. I went to Stonetown Mountains, I went to Ashenvale, I went to Silverpine Forest. I went to a lot of places, and yet I was still mainly in the Barrens. And I'm not going to lie, spending 20 plus hours in the Barrens is really boring. Even when I'm like addicted and having a good time, I really wish I got to see more of the world. And there is no change to that. You can't like fix that really. But the Barrens itself, like just the amount of questing that's done in this one specific zone, did not feel great. I think the difficulty, or at least the difficulty of the version that I played of hardcore World of Warcraft, was really good. It felt appropriately difficult. I don't really respect people who show up to play hardcore WoW and then want it to be easier. I think this is it's an optional way to play the game, and that it's supposed to be hard. Now, I've already admitted that I'm pretty biased. It's hard in the way that I want it to be hard. It's a challenge run, and the challenge is play the game via questing, right? I don't really respect people's opinions on trying to make hardcore WoW easier. I don't like the idea of, you can get like an extra life if you've earned like an achievement, or you can buy certain things, or you can use the auction house, if you earn certain points. And the reason I don't like that, I don't think these ideas are necessarily bad ideas in a vacuum, but when it comes to WoW players, amongst other things, are like whiny little tryhards. They're whiny little tryhards. Like I kind of ranted about earlier, if the most optimal way to play hardcore World of Warcraft is to spam dungeons, then if you allow spamming dungeons as a thing, that's all people are going to do. You're going to lose a lot of what makes this version of the game different. And I think in this game, money not having a value and it being purely like a mechanically skill-based experience, how you handle certain situations and certain luck and drops and whatever, I think that makes this game very rewarding to play. I don't think it's very rewarding for somebody to farm gold, or to, have somebody who played the game honorably or normally, whatever you want to call it, and then run you through stuff and then you get carried to the end. I don't think that that's particularly fair. Not necessarily fair in one sense, but not fair in the sense that this game is fun because you can still interact and experience it with other people, that everybody is restricted in the same ways you are. And loosening those restrictions makes it so that other people can play the game differently. That people can make the game easier. And if one person can make the game easier, then everybody starts making the game easier. And then this world that is built on having multiple people sort of experiencing the same world, but in their own sort of unique ways, deteriorates. All right, and that's probably it. The last thing I'll say is that it was a good game. I think hardcore World of Warcraft was a very fun experience and a really fun time. I don't have any real interest in playing it again. I got my fill. I would say if I spent dozens of hours playing a video game, I don't really need to touch it again. And I hope you guys all check it out, and I hope you enjoy it if you haven't tried it already. And I know there's going to be official Blizzard servers if they're not released yet. And I hope those servers are good, or at the very least that people enjoy having those servers. I had a great time playing Hardcore WoW, and I hope that it continues to sort of thrive in a way that people continue to enjoy it. That's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.